Hi, this is Hyperwave. I'm Leah and I'm here with Tyler Jenks. Today is going to be an interesting vlog where we're going to discuss mainly why we keep talking about Bitcoin and what we feel as the differences between Bitcoin versus all other cryptos. And then if we have a little time, then potentially look at what happened in the price action of GBTC and Bitcoin today. But to start it off, I'll just begin by saying that it's a very, very interesting subject. There's, I think, a lot of value in some of the cryptocurrencies, in some of the ICOs, and we'll talk about both. Although, in the end of the day, a question that comes up that I get asked is, what is the value of Bitcoin? And that really is the cost of mining plus a rarity premium based on the limited issuance, which, as we know, is 21 million. And that's kind of the premise of that we'll start this off of why I personally think that a lot of cryptos may go to zero in the long term. So I guess lucrative way to start off. And just one more preface that this will probably start off financial, go a bit theoretical, and we may be playing around everywhere in between. Tyler?
Great. Hello, everybody. This topic has really gotten red hot over the last 12 months, mainly because of the number of ICOs and new cryptocurrencies coming out. That was really even before the SEC and the CFTC began voicing opinions on various things. Haven't really taken any action at this point, but they've done some things such as approve a couple of exchanges, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the CME, as well as the CBOE, Chicago Board Option Exchange. So that's forward movement on the part of the regulators having to do with this whole area. Whereas for 9 years, basically, they didn't get involved except with some opinions here and some opinions there, and we're looking into it. That's all changed now. Things are moving very, very rapidly. But at the same time, in the wake of these ICOs, within our community, within the cryptocurrency / Bitcoin ecosystem, civil war has broken out, and it's very ugly. And there are people on both sides that are really not comporting themselves as this asset class deserves. So, based on that, Leah and I have been talking off camera for a long time about what do we feel, what do we believe. And, my background having to do with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, I just got very interested very early, and I started mining about 7 years ago. And nothing really was happening back then. And a couple of movies came out, a couple of documentaries, and some people beginning to talk about it. But over the years, I've been doing many other things other than this asset class. But I've gotten more and more interested in it, and then deeper and deeper into analyzing it. And so I feel as if I'm part of this community now. This village, really, it's not a city, and it's certainly not a country or a continent. It's a little village right now, and there's quite a few members of it, but some nasty things have been happening, and we'll talk about some of those today. But that's just an overall introduction to why Leah and I decided that we would have this rather personal discussion on our vlogs. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Leah.
Awesome. So the first thing that really strikes me that I always found most beautiful about Bitcoin was that it is truly decentralized, as we know. a lot of people do debate if the other cryptos are decentralized or centralized. In my opinion, they are centralized. And what makes it so? They're run by companies, they're run by partnerships, trusts, individuals, and there's hierarchies. There's someone there who at the top hires, fires, makes marketing decisions, administrative decisions, 1 to 3 devs, etc. And for the most part, that's a very dangerous game. To already switch it to Bitcoin, though, as well, to throw this into this whole beginning of this discussion, I do think that the forks are also very, very dangerous for Bitcoin and its potential to potentially become centralized one day. With what happened with Bitcoin and Bcash, with all the many, many forks and hundreds potentially of forks that are going to happen this year, Bitcoin is being and can be changed in certain ways, and especially what we saw with SegWit 2x, where decisions were made by a certain group of people. You're looking at a new type of decentralized nature that didn't exist and wasn't an aspect of that beautiful Bitcoin that originated in the first place and currently is still strong, is king, and has the sub-asset classes of crypto underneath it. So I guess turning it to you, Tyler, how do you see this decentralized versus centralization, debate issue within this civil war play out in regards to how you feel about, even from a financial perspective, of why we focus on Bitcoin versus not so much talking about the other, trading the altcoins?
Yeah, that's a great observation, Leah. The most important thing to me about Bitcoin, and the reason we keep calling it the king, and to take the metaphor one step further, all of the other ICOs that are being spawned off of the original Bitcoin blockchain are like dukes and duchesses and princes and princesses, and the king deserves respect. The problem with Bitcoin is it can't force respect because there is no it there. There is no centralized government. There is no corporation. There is no board of trustees. There is this very loose affiliation of true believers who read the white paper, helped develop the entire blockchain, made changes to that blockchain, and there was no one else doing it. If you don't like the metaphor of a king, think of a golden goose. And throughout history, that fable of killing the golden goose resonates in all types of ways. Yeah, you get one meal out of a cooked goose, but this thing that keeps producing enormous wealth, enormous value, enormous sense of community on a worldwide borderless basis without anyone calling the shots. You've got to understand what that means. And how dare the people that want to fork off by changing a couple of lines of code so they can come out with some little imitation And then that's fine. That's what capitalism's all about. But then to turn around and do destructive things and say destructive things about this 10-year history that no matter what they say, no matter what they do, they're not going to kill it off. They'll slow it down. They'll cause tremendous confusion with new people coming in. They'll make it impossible to explain. And they'll force things like the SEC and the CFTC, and someday probably the IRS, to look at the entire thing and try to sort out this mess. There was no mess, but there is now. So I was particularly interested in what both Jay Clayton of the SEC and Christopher Giancarlo of CFTC said last week in front of Congress, the Banking Committee. It's a brilliant, if you can find it, everybody should read it, just word for word. For one thing, it gives me a lot of optimism about our regulators. And I've worked with regulators for 40 years, and these two guys seem to really have it together. But in any case, just a couple of quick quotes from Christopher Giancarlo, CFTC. He says, "I believe every ICO I've seen is a security. Not some of them, not most of them, not a few of them, every single one of them. Obviously they are. Now, all the lawyers involved in giving advice to the people that have come out with ICOs know infinitely more than I do about it. But I've been in securities in 40 years, and the intent of what is being done is a security, and it will be regulated." Jay Clayton went on to say, "I want to go back to separating ICOs and cryptocurrencies, separating them. ICOs that are securities offerings, we should regulate them like we regulate securities offerings." 3 words he added to it. End of story. So we've got 1,300 cryptocurrencies now. There was only one. In my opinion, there should only be one. However, I believe that a great number of the cryptocurrencies have come out under the proper motivation and with the intent of being additive to what has already been produced by Bitcoin and blockchain. So I am not questioning the intent of a great number of them. All the rest, as Leah said, in my opinion and others, are going to go away. The light will come on one day and people will say, "Oh, now I understand." But it's so confusing right now, it hasn't. So that's my perspective. And we can go into detail about that, but I don't want to hog the microphone, so I'm going back to Leah.
Yeah, it's also very fascinating in that absolutely there's a lot of money to be made in trading altcoins. A lot of people who are true believers in Bitcoin, or just a lot of people with recent FOMO who got in, are holding this hodler mentality that Tyler and I recently did a vlog about, which we discuss the negatives we believe in hodling because of the importance and the opportunities to also trade, and to trade and the importance of trading Bitcoin. And it's also interesting for me in the end of the day, because one discussion that's not being brought up is the blockchain behind these different altcoins. Really, the blockchain that the original protocol, one of the tech behind Bitcoin, the blockchain was created because of Bitcoin. Now we have other blockchains, absolutely. Yet, what is the incentive for miners to then mine these other altcoins if they believe that Bitcoin is going to, let's say, go to the moon and it's more financially interesting, really, maximizing for them? They're only going to pick one. In a centralized system, if the IMF has been talking about releasing a cryptocurrency, you're looking at an interesting situation that can be paid for in different ways. But if we just speak about miners and choosing where they are going to mine, they are going to be picking the coin that they believe is going to be providing the most profit for them. Now, with that said, it could be the altcoins right now. They could get behind some that they think absolutely are going to make them much more money than mining Bitcoin. Prior to 2x, it was a very interesting civil war going on of what was going to become more interesting, what was going to, where were they going to go. But in the end of the day, it is a zero-sum game when it comes to mining these coins. So it is important to think about that in the long term. If Bitcoin continues to get regulated securely, if it continues to get the blessing of the SEC, if Clayton continues to say optimistic things and things continue to go forward and there are more ETFs, then I do think the future of Bitcoin, regardless of our discussion of forking, has an extremely promising future. And I personally believe that miners will continue to be most incentivized to mine Bitcoin over the other altcoins. So just regarding a mining perspective, I don't often hear that discussed in the ICO discussions of the many, many startups that say we're going to launch an ICO. And it sounds sexy to say that, but I do almost rarely hear them talk about where they expect the continued mining to come from. So that's just one note that it confuses me when it comes to all the people who are proponents of the various altcoins, but as well as continuing to pump out so many coins and the desire to continue to pump out so many coins. Tyler?
Yeah, just being brutally frank, the thing that bothers me the most about what some people are doing in the space is similar to what has happened historically in wars, with one group trying to conquer another group, and even in small skirmishes and all of the rest of it. And that is, you attempt to poison the land as it exists. You do that by killing off the cattle or the sheep and throwing them in the wells, and then that which poisons the wells so no one can live there. It's just mass destruction. And that's what's happening with those that are attempting to act parasitically to Bitcoin and to the original blockchain. Now, there's plenty to go around. So I have no problems with those that want to make some changes to the only blockchain there is. Now, why do I say that? Well, don't take my word for it. When Senator Cotton asked Giancarlo of the CFTC about the value of Bitcoin, Giancarlo replied with, quote, "If there was no Bitcoin, there would be no DLT," which of course is distributed ledger technology, which of course is blockchain. That is the progenitor. And he goes on to make a very interesting point that Leah just made. Sure, you and I can decide tomorrow we are going to change 2 lines of code because it's available to everyone. It's totally open source. So you can take it, you can make a little tweak here and there, or a lot of big tweaks, and say that this new thing that we have just done is going to be advantageous to the world because of A, B, C, and D. And by the way, we are going to produce 100 billion that we'll call tokens. And if we want to, we'll make it 10 times that amount. If we want to, we'll cut it in half. And it's the we part of that statement that Leah keeps talking about. That's the difference between an open source, decentralized, no one's in charge, everybody must agree setup the way Bitcoin and the original blockchain is. Now, here is the practical side of what I just said. If you have a real token that has real value with a limited supply that somebody must mine or produce by spending money to create value, we'll talk about that as A. B is, you don't care if anyone spends any money to buy equipment, to use electricity, to hire people to sit in front of computers 24 hours a day, because you have decided you will simply out of thin air call yourself a cryptocurrency and people will give you money. That's scenario B. And I won't discuss that. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. But in scenario A, where everything is legitimately done for the right purposes and motives, anyone that comes up with something that steals from the original paper, the white paper, steals from the work that hundreds of developers over 10 years have put together, which is the blockchain. At the moment they fork off using all of that prior experience, knowledge, money, and time, they become parasitic to Bitcoin. Why? Because they need the same miners who are mining Bitcoin to mine their token or coin. And so it becomes a competition where Bitcoin once had close to 100% of all the capitalization. It's dropped down into the low 40s to high 30s as more and more cryptos are added into the space. The good ones, the bad ones, the illegal ones, the fraudulent ones, the ones that no one can tell what the heck they are and which is good and which is bad. They just keep producing. And each one of those steals from the time needed to create Bitcoin. Well, why would they do that? Why would the miners do that? Let's talk capitalism. Because they're paid more or incented or bribed to do that. Otherwise, they all know, they've been around for 1 year, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. They know what the quality is of Bitcoin and the process that produces Bitcoins. That's where the value is. But if somebody is going to take whatever the value is at this moment, let's call it X, for producing the next Bitcoin, and somebody comes along with a big basket of money because they've taken it from investors, and they use that money to incent the miners not to mine Bitcoin, but to mine this new XYZ token that they're getting paid more for. And that's precisely what has happened over and over again over the last couple of years, and why there is such a divide in our community. Instead of working together, we are being split apart because of this division between Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I am convinced personally that Bitcoin will be around for a very, very long time and will make significant contributions to world finance. I do not have that same feeling for the vast majority of cryptocurrencies. But as I have said before, even if 10% of all the cryptos that have been produced or might be produced in the future have valid value to them, we're still talking about another 100 to 130 cryptos. And some of them will do very, very well, in my opinion. And at some point, Leah and I will start talking about those that we believe are actually adding value. Leah?
Yeah. It's interesting. So one thing I've been thinking about as well is it's going to be an anecdote, but it's in service of ensuring that I think the top developers and programmers in the world have been working on Bitcoin, and the strides in development have just been absolutely incredible, and absolutely it's gotten it to a point where everybody is talking about, the SEC is talking about it. I mean, it's a valid cryptocurrency, a valid asset class. It's fascinating. Yet, if we keep muddying the waters, I do worry that these beautifully powerful core devs may start working on other projects, which is okay. But I do worry about, as a whole, then, cryptocurrencies, ensuring that they're developed from, I think that, as I had said before in a different vlog, that we're still in our infancy, which is exciting because there's so much room to grow. But that's if we maintain our focus. Now, the anecdote that I was just thinking about was when I was working at the World Bank, and I started working originally, luckily when I was 19, for the vice president of the Africa region, and they had just started rolling out M-Pesa in Kenya, which was really the first SMS-based microloan system. And it was incredible. And it was really, though, the most basic tech. So skipping forward a little bit, I started working, it was about 4 years later, on a project in in Gujarat, India, in working with ultra-poor, self-identified women entrepreneurs, beautiful women entrepreneurs. Now, a lot of these women entrepreneurs were living in the rural countryside near the Pakistan border. And they also very much wanted and needed to receive microloans. So the same tech was taken and given to them, and that was paid for by corporations I won't name, and it epically failed for a very, very simple reason, was that the vast majority of the women that they had just received those cell phones were illiterate, so they could not read what the text messages were that were coming through. So after a couple of years, new tech were developed, and it became pictorial, and it was a pictorial SMS-based system, and it worked perfectly. I mean, it's still in its infancy as well, but it absolutely started working, and they actually were able to even start doing an accounting system that was sent back to a centralized system in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad. And it's taking off and developing, and that's because there's a real need, and there is enrollment, and there is consensus and there's constant discussion by the women who are using this system, who are using the tech every day, and therefore explaining what's working, what's not working. Why the other system didn't work, that was a pretty clear conversation that was, we don't know what we're reading when it comes through. But now this new tech is getting better and better because there's a meeting once a month. And each woman is coming, and it's happening in the rural centers and then also in the headquarters, and then all of that information is aggregated and taken back to the various developers that are working on this tech. So I do truly believe in the absolute power of consensus, enrollment, ensuring that people have a voice, that they're being heard, that therefore all of that can be taken and people can be incentivized to therefore create improvements and continue to develop in a way that's beneficial, not just for themselves but for the whole. So regarding Bitcoin, I think that, again, going back to, and Tyler explained why we call it the king, but if all of these issues, and it's still having so many issues, and the exchanges are still having so many issues, and moving money around from your wallet, and we could talk another vlog about cold storage. There is still a lot of tech that just needs to be worked on, and just ensuring that, I think the decentralization is core to being able to have enough information and the right information to get to the right hands so that the development process goes in, I think, the right incremental steps of improvement where it needs to go, as well as that our beautifully powerful and brilliant core devs and programmers stick with Bitcoin and or any of these other potentially very powerful cryptos that Tyler, altcoins that Tyler was just speaking about, to ensure that progress is made in the right manner, in a correct manner, in a consensual manner, in a manner that benefits the whole, not just a select few. Tyler?
Great, Leah. I think I've covered the points I wanted to make, and you've done a terrific job also. We were going to take a quick look at Bitcoin prices. This morning we did a vlog where we thought last night looked pretty good, and we're taking these little steps forward. We took a couple of more little steps today, right into the close of our markets. Our stock markets, by the way, soared today with the Dow up over 500 points at one time. And as we've been saying, we had a momentary blip in the traditional equity markets around the world, but that too would pass, and I believe it's well under its way. I think what we'll do is we'll wait until tomorrow morning for our next vlog on the prices. Bitcoin right now is at 88.25. It's trying to get back over that 9,000 level, and hopefully it's going to be able to do that tonight. And with that, back to Leah.
Thank you, everyone. And given that this is a very interesting topic, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this, we absolutely welcome and would love to hear your thoughts and comments and questions and strong opinions as well. So thanks for watching.
Great. Bye-bye.